This is a HeadGum podcast.
Hello, hello. This is Fake the Nation, where we talk about news, we talk about culture, and where we do not let the news of one election ruin our hearts. No, we don't. And today we're going to talk about that election. It's going to be a freewheeling conversation. We might talk about other things if we get to it. I don't know, but we're going to take a chance to process. And to do just that, I have the exact right panel assembled for you guys. We're all meeting remotely. We're meeting at a different time than normal. Everything's a little bit weird. We're all feeling a little strange. And these guys are going to help us get through it. We have two absolute Fake the Nation fan favorites with us. First up, from he's a stand-up comedian who I love and adore. He's so smart. He's so funny. He's also host of the daily podcast Stand Up with Pete Dominick. It is the incredible, the wonderful Pete Dominick. Hey, Pete.
Hey, Negin. Great to be here.
We are also joined by another fan favorite. You've seen him on Whose Line Is It Anyways? He's right now on the road with the show Who's Live. You can hear his podcast, The Smartest Man in the World podcast. I mean, the man is just an utter delight of cultural products. It is the one and only Greg Proops. Hey, Greg Proops.
Hello, everybody. Hello, America.
Just a reminder to listeners, if you are interested in supporting the show, you can do that at patreon.com/Negin Farsad. And now let's get into it with topic number one and maybe topic only. We fucking had a presidential election last night, and Trump won. So that's interesting. Trump won. I guess now I just have a series of questions. Now, my first question is, how do you feel? Anybody?
All right. Well, I feel quite ill. I wasn't able to sleep. I was a little shocked and disappointed.
Yeah.
I remembered Hillary, of course, in 2016 and how bloody awful that was. I think I was a little more numb this time than last time. I'm also, it confirms a bunch of things that I already knew and revealed a bunch of things about myself that I should have known better. I was quite enthusiastic and was gung-ho, completely on board with Kamala Harris being the candidate. I'm from San Francisco, and she's always been a hero of mine. And to have a Black woman in the White House, to me, was a dream come true. I've only loved maybe 3 candidates in my life. And no fair guessing which ones, but Hillary and Kamala were 2 of them. And so I was a little more numb this time and in complete shock. What I didn't count on was my lack of contact with reality. And the reality is that America is irretrievably, in this instance, racist and sexist, and that the idea of a Black woman was way more than 60 something, however many percent of the white male voting electorate could stand. In other words, they're willing to sacrifice millions of lives to a possible another pandemic, to women's health, children being shot in school. None of that, if you'll pardon the expression, fucking matters. All that matters is centering whiteness and centering male privilege. And if you don't think that someone who's literally shitting their pants, who is pretending to fillet a mic, who had no policy, whose last few weeks were an insane dinosaur slog through the last swamp, and offered nothing to the public other than hatred and pain, beating a woman who's as accomplished and intelligent and forthright and honest as Kamala Harris, isn't the embodiment of white male privilege, then I have nothing more to say to you. So that's how I'm feeling.
Pete, how do you feel?
I was going to say everything Greg said. So I Here another question. I feel similar to Greg for a lot of those reasons, but I would add things that he didn't mention, only to be a little different, because I agree so much with what he said, which is, why do people think what they think? And I don't think it's all quite as simple as Greg put it, but I think it's mostly that, a lot of that. I don't think everybody pays attention to this thing or that thing, or worries about other people very much, frankly. I'm shocked that so many white women didn't vote for Kamala Harris because they're women. So we always question, especially white guys, hey, how much does gender and race matter to you, especially if it's a white woman or a woman of color? It's not for me to decide, but that was pretty shocking. But I think that I want to talk about boys and men, and I want to increasingly talk about it. I've been reading a lot. Richard Reeves, Ruth Whitman, both have great books about boys and men these days. And I think that, and I think Greg and Negin, obviously, I'd love to know what you think, would agree that the misinformation and disinformation from Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Joe Rogan, and all of those guys, which we all know too well, was very, very effective. And I think it's very hard for people, certainly I'll try to speak for Greg on this, and to understand why someone can believe or think what they think, because we have a better set of critical thinking skills. Maybe we're a little bit older, maybe we're from have just a better understanding of history and psychology. But the bottom line is the misinformation and disinformation that Donald Trump was happy to spread, Elon Musk was happy to spread and echo, Joe Rogan, et cetera, that began in the Trump era in earnest. It was always the province of right-wing media. And then COVID really, I think, accelerated it. And then we just saw more and more of it. That misinformation, the idea that people believe so fully that the moon is made of cheese, is really, I think, a huge factor that it's very, very hard for people on the left and liberals to combat, because how do I react to the fact that Greg Proops went to school today and he came home as Gail Proops? He got a surgery. Like, how do I if you believe I sent my boy to school and she came home a girl, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know why you would believe that. I want to make fun of you. I want to call you names, but that's not going to help. So I just don't know what to do about that issue of mis and disinformation propaganda that has been so effective, especially with young men.
It's interesting because okay, so like I've done a lot of like touring in the last like 5 months, and especially in a lot of like red states and stuff like that. And the thing, like I totally hear you, both of you. I think, and I'm going to simplify it in a totally other direction, which is that like Jimmy Carter lost in 1980 because of inflation, by and large, also the Iran hostage crisis. But let's focus on inflation for a second. And when I was out touring and like talking to people and voters, and I met so many undecided voters, and I was very shocked by how many undecided voters I met. And I met a lot of undecided voters who were Black, like Black women, undecided voters, who would say to me, inflation is a real problem, so I have to do my research. And I was like, oh, like you might not vote for Kamala. And they were like, well, the thing is, Trump is better on the economy. So there's this
92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris. So I wouldn't.
No, hey, I didn't say anything about, did it sound like I was about to blame Black women? Did it?
No, you were saying that they were confused, but they weren't confused.
No, I said I talked to some Black women who said, I'm talking to like 3 or 4 Black women who cited the economy as a reason that they wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris. I was just saying I was surprised that even among the demographics that you would never think would say anything like that, something about inflation was just, people couldn't like wrap their heads around inflation, that like Kamala Harris could do anything about it because she presided over it. And that, it to me, is what lost the election by and large. I think like I think it like lost it for Jimmy Carter, and I think it lost it for this administration. And again, this is just like how I'm seeing it. Like, from the people I talked to, that was the thing that came up over and over and over. People would tell me about the price of eggs, and they would tell me about like people would talk about grocery bills and how much a thing would cost, and then a thing would cost this the next time, and like it was constant, and it was like alarmingly constant, to the point where I was like, that was the one thing that really like that was always worrying to me, was like, do we have the right verbiage around inflation in this campaign?
I think a lot of it is we miss. I mean, I'm a misguided liberal, and I read everything wrong. But I do understand, because I have a white family, that they don't logic and using any kind of reasoning or facts is not important to them.
That's right.
They what they've heard and how they feel about what they've heard. And I would add to Pete's assertion about disinformation. I agree with it utterly. That Russia has had a good deal to do with this. They've been able to infiltrate almost every right-wing podcast, as we know, for a fact. That's not. I'm not
there's the stories have come out. Yeah, for sure.
And that Joe Rogan, for instance, or
and on social media.
Musk, right, Elon Musk bought X for the express purpose of doing what happened yesterday, and it succeeded in essence. It's not the fact that Trump's completely unlikable, a pervert, a rapist, and all those things literally doesn't enter into the conversation when you talk to the people who vote for him. That's not something they're thinking about. Right. They're thinking about their own fear, hatred, pain. What did James Baldwin say? If people really dealt with their pain, then they'd have to look at themselves, and it's too painful. And so when I talk to my family that are Trumpkins, it's fentanyl or some sort of other fantasy-based element that's not really something that's a factor in any of our lives, because, as you know, they've been stopping the flow of fentanyl, and it's been a major priority. And yet they'll hook onto something like that, and then nothing else matters. And I
although fentanyl overdoses have been a serious issue.
Oh, to be sure. However, it's not a serious issue for every single Trump voter.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I guess my question is with you, here's where I wonder what we do, because we have spent 8 years saying that those voters are racist and misogynist, and it hasn't necessarily worked as a strategy. Mm-mm. Has that won us any friends or fans in the Democratic? Has that brought people in, or
I don't understand that. That's nobody's strategy.
But it's kind of like. Do you feel like that's kind of all we do as Democrats?
No, I do not feel like that's all we do. I work with activists and organize and have for years, and we get people elected that pass important policies, and it's not by calling people racist. I think your point is true that people that are racist don't like being called racist and sexist, but I'm never going to stop pointing out when people are marginalized, and when you are marginalizing, when you are being a bigot against someone. I mean, this is my entire career is based on standing up to bullies. If someone's going to say that's not a strategy to convince them or to unify, I take it on a case-by-case basis. But I don't think that that's been the strategy of the Democratic Party. It's not the strategy to call.
I guess it's just like popular. It's just like popular rhetoric. I feel like is this rhetoric, and I wonder if it is like just at the end of the day, because like we really the Latino gap really narrowed, and so those are people of color that you would think would be Democrats. You know what I mean? We sort of thought that demographic shift was going to go in our favor, and it just absolutely didn't.
I think that's a man issue. Again, back to Greg's original point.
I was going to say those are men.
Overwhelmingly Latino men, and that's why I brought up and added what Greg said. Boys and men was the first thing I said. Mm-hmm. We need to deal with what is appealing to them. So you can point to, we shouldn't be calling them names, but I would point to the people who are radicalizing them, the people who are talking so much and so obsessed with gender and sexuality and saying that Greg Proops and Pete Dominick are beta cucks. Like, we care. Like, Greg has been I think the kind of comedian and kind of well-known person that people might have guessed about his sexuality, but if they ever called him gay, he would never care. He would go with it because it doesn't matter. And I say that about him because he's been a model that way, but also he's been doing it for like 30 years. Like 30 years ago, Greg was comfortable with being called whatever because he didn't think that he was less than if you were being called that. And so the idea that we have to talk to men and boys about what it means to be a man and a boy And I think that's important. I think that we need to talk about strength and pain and gender. I think we need to recognize the suffering of boys and men and where they are lost and how we need to find them. But the answers aren't the ones that they're getting. And they are getting answers. They're getting answers from Jordan Peterson and from Andrew Tate and from Joe Rogan and from a rapist, Donald Trump. That's where they're getting their answers. So, trying to get to boys and men, I think, is a really important objective. And it's very, very hard. It's very hard.
So we experienced the first administration in 2016, and like, what will you, personally do this time around? I guess, yeah. What will you personally do differently this time around? Because
I'm gonna
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, great.
Well, for example, I was thinking that like I would try and consume news more smartly. Like I wouldn't read about every fucking fart that he does. You know what I mean? I feel like there was something about the way I consumed news that was like the mere utterance of an idea I obsessed over, as opposed to like something that was like truly actionable. You know what I mean? So I think that my news consumption will be more tailored or something. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking out loud here. Greg, what were your thinking? What was your thinking?
Well, first I'm going to sulk and mope and be resentful and hate America for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to line my coffin because I sleep in a coffin like the great Sarah Bernhardt, not Sandra Bernhardt, Sarah Bernhardt. She slept in a coffin lined with fan letters. So I'm going to do that for a while. But also I'm going to bathe in the knowledge that I have been right as a comedian since for 30 years time, at least, like Pete says. One, I'm straight and I make no case for it. And I've never bothered to hide my effeminate baby killing faggotry. And secondly, right now I need to just recoup. But what I will renew is my faith in Black women and their absolute, uncanny, unfailing perception of how to win democracy and how to hold and respect democracy. Because I haven't seen any failure in that regard in my lifetime. Not one time have Black women become fascists in the face of everything. Not one time have they given up in the face of overwhelming odds against them, medically, politically, psychologically, emotionally. And thirdly, my detestation of white men and what they feel that they have to become in order to carry on is going to continue. Like Pete said, I think the overarching issue in communicating in the next, if there is a next election, hello everybody, it is getting to them and cutting out on rich and disinformation. This is going to be made exponentially harder by the fact that I feel like this next administration is going to be something close to lawless. We're going to see something more like Duarte in the Philippines, or we should be so lucky to have Orban in Hungary. I mean, now that they've got the ball, the idea that Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, Mike Flynn, and all of them are going to be let near the levers of power terrifies me in an insane way. To answer your question, which I haven't done yet, there's nothing to do for, at the end of the day, and I'm never going to give up. There's nothing to do but to fight. If Black people for 400 years and everyone who's not a white person in this country could stand up to the white bullshit that's been weighed upon them, the slavery, the indentured servitude, all that, then I can too. And secondly, my parents, I'm old. My parents were in World War II and the Depression, and they were able to stand up to that. And there were a lot of Proopses killed in Europe during World War II. And that's what we're looking at. So if they can handle it, I have to be able to psychologically handle it. Am I handling it today? No, I'm a fucking crybaby today. But when things get going again, also, let's look at the next 3 months. We have till January 20th with this administration going on. And I like to think that they're, because they are so excellent, that there's going to be some things that happen between now and then that will give us hope.
Looks like we've got one more Proops to kill.
Right? That's what, that's the other thing. People,
Greg, I saw you on the show talking about me the other day, and
right? Right? I'm sure Elon Musk caught me posting my prancing dipshit meme time and time again. So I'm certain I've ended up on some list. Although, as Mark Maron once said, if the FBI is watching me, imagine how sad that FBI agent is.
I don't know about that. Let's think that's true.
I think they're on a good beat if they're on the Greg Proops seat.
Seriously. No, I can see them being bored with Marin, but if they're watching Proops, I'm not saying, I'm not putting down Mark. I think Greg lives a fascinating life. What will I do? I think that because I think a huge part of the problem is men and boys, and because I went through my own struggle for the first time, I had an awesome life. Very fortunate, very privileged, and my career, as you know, was just on fire, and up and up and up. I mean, I'm partly joking because we all had setbacks.
No, I got you.
And plenty of failures, but I mean, I had a great career. After I lost my 15-year corporate media gig at SiriusXM, I was also at CNN at the time. I saw comedian Russ Maneve, and he said, "Why the long face?" And I said, "I just lost my job." And I was talking about it. He goes, "You're upset because you lost a 14-year gig?" And it offered me some perspective. But the bottom line was I didn't have resilience, and I broke. When I lost that job. I had 2 daughters, married, and I broke, and my marriage broke. And then that broke me even more. And so I had to find and establish resilience. And part of what I did is I talked about it on my daily podcast, and I talked about it at my weekly hangouts, and I talked about it with other men with nothing in mind other than trying to be me and be vulnerable and real. But what it did was it created a safe space for men to suffer, including, yes, white men of privilege, because we had it so good that when we do have setbacks, we crumble like I did, like a snowflake, a real snowflake, melted. Whereas, to my black female friends, they're like, "It's Tuesday, get up, quit whining." And so I definitely am going to continue that work. But more importantly, and again, I agree with what Greg said about women of color, which I'm super proud that in my community that I've built along with my podcast and over 15 years in radio, it is kind of led by women of color. I mean, there are a lot of them, and it's a safe space for women and women of color, and a lot of the men in my community follow that. It's a wonderful thing that I've accidentally done, and so I'm going to try to create more of that community. I'd love to have both of you joining me anytime at one of our hangouts to talk about that. But to me, every religious philosophy, including the one that appeals to me the most, which is Buddhism, talks a lot about community and community building. And I think right now that's what I can do. I can help build community and help people get through what we're going to inevitably, I think, have to deal with.
Well, you guys have already touched on some of the things, my next kind of area of questioning, which was, what are you, kind like a note of hopefulness, which you've both given us, which I love. I personally, I feel like I personally have spent so much time just kind of like hating is a strong word, but just like demonizing this vague Trump voter. And I would like to personally stop doing that. These are my American brothers and sisters, and I don't hate them. You know what I mean? And they're, we're all like literally in this together. And the more I tour and the more I meet them, and the more I have conversations with them and the more I hang out with them, like the more it becomes clear to me, that we're the same. And the other thing is a couple of other things. I can't visit Iran. You guys joke about being on some list, but I have been too public as a comedian in the United States to visit the dozens and dozens of family members that I have in Iran. I've missed weddings. I've missed funerals. I've missed babies being born. I've missed everything because that is an actual authoritarian regime with no First Amendment rights. So we're not there yet. And I get to say whatever the fuck I want on this podcast. And I think that's great. I really, really cherish that. And it's like a feeling I get to kind of being reminded of all the time because I have so much family there. And I like to share that sometimes with listeners because I think it's harder sometimes when you don't necessarily have like easy access to an actual authoritarian regime, to remember that. So that kind of keeps me hopeful. The other thing is what you're talking about, Pete. You know, I was listeners know I was at TED a couple weeks ago, and the session I moderated was like the democracy session that I moderated for them. And I had 3 conversations. One was with a woman who was advancing Native American political leadership with an organization that finds and fosters like Native Americans into political roles. And another one
gonna end all that real quick.
well, we'll see. And then there's another gentleman who was working with Muslims, a Jewish man who works with Muslims and Jews, bringing coalition work. And then the third woman was trying to make public service sexy again because there's so many public service jobs open and very few people that want to fill them. And public service work is just like not, the Goldman Sachs that everyone tries to go and work at.
More attractive woman in that role to make public service sexy. Right now, she's not going to do anything for anyone.
So these are the conversations that I was moderating. And at the end, we made everyone, and the point of the session was that civic life and making a commitment to civic life can almost have nothing to do with presidential politics, right? It is not all about presidential politics. It's about like whatever local granular thing that you can do and get involved with and make happen. You can make a lot of shit happen on a local in your local world. I mean, I talk a lot about what I do with Tompkins Square Park in New York City. There are things that you can do locally, and they don't have to be partisan. They can just be like, I see a problem and I want to improve it. So that's where I feel like lean into that, because action is like a balm to this feeling of this loss that we have today. Action is a balm to that feeling. And so if there's anything, and then also like the action with other like-minded people, like Pete was saying, you find a community of like-minded people, it's more fun that way. So that's kind of like what's making me feel good about what's going to happen. And also, we've been here before. And guess what? Last time we were here, what happened was in 2018, there was a blue wave. That Trump hasn't had momentum since 2016. In fact, this is the first time he's had a piece of momentum. It fucking sucks, but he hasn't, right? He is lost. And okay, today he won. But we have kind of consistently won many times. These things, they swing back and they swing forth. What do you feel?
I'm not sure if the past is prologue, but
I think what you said, Negin, was very apt, and I was very. I think it's so salient to talk about not being able to go back to Iran, because that is a theocracy, the kind of which that we as sharing, caring liberals are most frightened of. And no, we're not there yet. And so rather than sound the complete throw in the towel alarm, I think we have to take it one step at a time and do what you say, which is get involved and get connected. As Pete says, building a community is everything. And understanding and taking care of one another. Now, I live in California, so we're sort of our own, republic. But as far as you were talking about, like I'm playing in the South this week. We're in Charleston, Charlotte, Savannah, and then Florida for a week. So I'm in the heart of the matter here. And I have to play for these people, including tonight in about 5 hours. And I can't go on stage with absolute rancor in my heart, knowing that 60% of them are the demonic cocksuckers that I revile with every fiber of my that I wish they would explode into 1,000 oscillating fractals so that I could shoot them out of the sky with my Jewish space laser. You have to deal with everybody, and in general, we do. But yes, I think you're right. It's just that this week and today are a very difficult time to talk about regrouping. But your point is very well taken, and so is yours, Pete. The only thing to do is reorganize and reboot. Whether Black people want to do this again in the face of 400 years of bullshit and two of these last three elections being so hideously apparent that white America gives two fucks about whether they live or die. You could also say the same thing about all women. But then that brings up the same point that Pete was talking about before and that you were talking about, Negin, about what's the rationale for voting for him. A lot of women felt that it would protect them and their whatever they perceive as their privilege and or position. And it's not necessarily just to end this enormously rambling thought, Orwell knew everything about the psychology of propaganda. And because having gone through the Spanish Civil War, having gone through Britain, in the period when Britain demanded that people carry identity cards on the street and you could be stopped for them, he wanted to call the book 1948 because he felt that that was what was going on in England right after the war. It wasn't supposed to be a futuristic fantasy. It was, he thought if they had the technology, they would absolutely spy on everyone and they would absolutely have thought police. And his publisher talked him out of calling it 1948, so he called it 1984. He said that doublethink is the ability to hold two contradictory ideas simultaneously and believe them both true. And that's what we see. People absolutely have an understanding that Biden has been a better president, that he's a better person. They also understand that whatever Trump is peddling and that his enemies are your enemies and that we've always been at war with Eurasia and we shall always be at war with Eurasia. They're able to hold those simultaneously. And that's a mental gyration that people with lateral thinking it's difficult for us to understand. And like you say, you can't go around hating people every single second of the goddamn day. However, I reminded of something that my old friend Warren Thomas, who was a comedian from San Francisco, who was Black, and another comedian friend of mine, David Feldman, who I don't speak to anymore. I don't speak to a lot of comedians since 2016. I used to go on Joe Rogan's show, Adam Carolla's show,
yes.
Zoe Coco Diaz. I was friendly with all of them. I got high with them and whatnot. Hillary was the line of demarcation for them. They absolutely bought and swallowed whole the incel thing. And that was it for me talking to them. But David Feldman said to Warren Thomas, why don't Black people burn the country to the ground? I don't understand how you can contain yourselves. And Warren said, David, we built it.
Yeah, that's a really profound point as to why they'll never give up on trying to, in the face of all of it. I would only say this about what you said, Negin, and I think it's a great point, and it's why I'm proud to say I have been doing it, both the community that I've been a part of creating with my show and online since the pandemic for sure, but also locally. Like I've been very active locally, and the only thing I would point out is, unfortunately, local politics are partisan. They're terrible. Not everywhere, but certainly where I live. I live in New York State, just north of New York City. And I've been involved in our Board of Education campaigns for the last 3 cycles. And it's uglier than anything I've ever been a part of. I was on Joe Rogan's show. I was on Real Time. I was on CNN every night and Sirius XM every day. And I don't mean to say that for any other point than to say I didn't get threats. I mean, people called me gay all the time and all kinds of other names, but people didn't threaten me. Well, 1994 Equinox, 92nd Street. I needed a membership. But the point that happened to me here is I was threatened over and over. And then they even called Child Protection Services with a fake call saying that I was abusing my teenage daughters. So it is partisan, and it's more than partisan. It's fascist at the local level. If you're effective, which I am, speaking out and organizing and advocating for marginalized communities, specifically the Black community, the LGBT community, and the Jewish community in my town. If you're effective at that, and I was, they will try to shut you down. They will try to silence you. And so I like to think that there are things that I could work with MAGA people on, all kinds of things. But unfortunately, it's very hard to do that, even on things that you have similar interests on. And so it's not so easy to get things done locally. I encourage people to get involved. I've been involved. I would never want people to hear my story and be scared to be involved. You can do all kinds of things anonymously. I'm known in my town, obviously. So, but it's hard. It's hard locally because of the same reason that things are hard nationally. The kind of sexism and racism, and specifically Christian kind of nationalism, that religion, so it's against anybody who's not them, is very bad in the local level in towns across America. And I talk to people all over America every day.
You know, it kind of brings me back to Robert Putnam and Bowling Alone. It's just like I almost am like, you know, like I would like to join the same bowling league as my Republican counterparts. Like, how do we make that happen? You know what I mean? Because I feel like if there's just more points of contact that isn't about some kind of like policy oriented friction, then there would be more cohesion in general, like a more of an ability to like compromise when a point of friction occurs. You know, I think the idea that our institutions have frayed on a social level has affected us on a political level. And so for me, I'm like, let's fucking join the Elks Club. What are we doing? You know what I mean? What are the clubs? Let's join them, you know?
You have to recognize your humanity when you go into the Elks Club. So we've seen in our lifetimes what happened in Rwanda, before our lifetimes what happened in Europe, and now what's happened in America. If you don't recognize someone's humanity, then it's hard to work with them on the cleaning up the neighborhood litter project or anything else about animals, things that are easy, veterans issues or something. And I think that's really very hard. And I think that one of the differences, and I truly believe this, is that you pointed out that we call people racist and so on, and that's not good. Okay, but I don't wish people suffering. Every morning in my meditation, I think about someone I hate, and I wish them well. I think that's one of the differences between liberals.
I love that, Pete. I love that.
I met you at the Elks Club. I don't want you or your family to suffer. But make no mistake, that's their brand. They do want me to suffer. Not only that, cruelty is the point. They enjoy my suffering. That's the difference between the tribes, I think, in America. They enjoy people suffering, and they can't stop talking about it. They love it. They live on it. That's part of they're policy free. They just want to see my family be hurt, or yours.
Okay, so like if that's true, which I'm not sure that it is, then we've popularized something else. You know what I mean? Like like these are cultural trends that can shift and change, just like cargo pants or bell bottoms. You know what I mean? They change. It's not forever.
Your Boolean Pollyannism is lifting my spirits, Negin. I think you're
that's
right.
why people tune in, Greg.
You're unfailingly positive. I agree with Pete, and I think that that's one of the cruxes of the matter, is that when you have someone's knocking on my door, that cruelty is absolutely the point, and that they love it. Part of what they really love is getting off on that. So yes, it's an exceedingly difficult challenge, and all politics are not only local; they're personal, on a one-to-one bloody basis. And I've never understood people who go, "Well, I don't like TV shows, or I don't like politics, or I don't like things like that because I don't like to think about it." And it's like every transaction in your life is political, whether you're paying a check at McDonald's. Literally everything in your life is political, and I've always believed that. So it's a long road, Negin. I agree with you that we have to reach out. I will be reaching out to a group of people who I say, like I said, probably 60 or 70% of whom like me because they know me from a thing, but if they knew how I really felt, they might not think I was the cute, hilarious clown.
You're like a covert bridge builder.
Mm-hmm. I try bit by bit to do things. I mean, I have a comedy album coming out in 2 weeks, and I can't think of anything less relevant to today. But then again, that's also being super selfish and centering myself. A lot of people were already saying to me today, go out and be funny. You know, uh, you have to follow your art and you have to do what Maya Angelou and Nina Simone said, which is represent the times and carry on. And it might
Yeah.
be the most difficult thing to do now, but it's also, I can't do anything else. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't go out and do that. But I can go out and carry on being funny and try to make a connection in that respect.
Well, folks, we're nearly out of time. Is there any final
Oh,
thoughts
thank
that
God.
you
I'm joking, of course.
No, I mean, and look, I feel like part of the problem with like having, with a podcast is that you have to be like, we're marinating in this feeling today. This podcast actually comes out on tomorrow.
Right.
And so we're also, but I also like, I want to also provide a little roadmap for how we're supposed to feel tomorrow and the next day. You know what I mean? And so, like, thank you for indulging me, even though you don't fucking feel up for it. And I totally get that. But like but you've thought about it, and that's incredible.
I would say in closing, if you're losing your mind and you don't know what to think or say or do, then congratulations, you are, quote, normal. And if you're in a tailspin with no clear direction or way to understand when your tailspin will end, welcome to the party. Give yourself compassion and grace, knowing that answers start appearing soon. And be kind and patient as you can. Don't smoke the sativa that I bought. That did not help me. It made it worse. I wouldn't suggest that brand. But most importantly, find community.
Mm.
Find community. There are so many amazing communities. And I welcome anybody listening to Fate the Nation to join me. I hope that both of you will join me on the show at standupwithpete.com, because building a community, there's so many that are building around as media fragments and spins off and corporate media starts to die, whether that's good or bad, there are all these other communities, and find people who care about what you care about, share your values, and support you when you're in that aforementioned tailspin. I have found that, and it's everything. That and getting outside.
Greg, any final thoughts?
No,
As
I
you
think
pre-
you're both very
And I think you got to
perceptive.
buy. I think you got to buy Greg's comedy album too. I think that's probably the other thing.
I'm excited about it. I made it last year at the end of the year. And of course, I talk about a lot of politics on it. I also am recording a new album on New Year's, which the agenda has utterly changed. Uh, so I'll be improvising something new, possibly hilarious anecdotes from my past. I'm excited about my new album because it's called Purple Shasta Raccoon. Because what I like to do is put forward things that are so non-commercially unviable to the public that I can remain the cult artist that I've always pined to be. No, I think you're both right. I think we need to have a few days to pull it together, and then put on your big person trousers and get back to work. And for the people who can't do it, the people who aren't able enough to fight, you have to fight for them, and that's sort of where it's at. I remain a white privileged guy, even in the face of all this, and I am going to use my platform to carry on being a voice for women, the disabled, trans people, gay people, of which Pete and I are two, women, and women, people who aren't white. There's no other way around it. It's my responsibility. And I'm also going to carry on railing against the legacy media because I think, and I'd like to get in one last shot as a final thought. They fucked us so roundly and have for 9 years by normalizing him, normalizing fascism, normalizing racism and Nazism as simple opinions and positions, as opposed to, as John Fetterman said the other day, it doesn't make you have you an opinion, it just makes you an asshole. So we've normalized being an asshole. I used to say it on my podcast, being homo, we can disagree about, finances, politics, policy. None of this is policy driven. It's hatred and grievance driven. And we've seen the king of grievance win. And so our counter to that has to be to not be aggrieved all the time, but to hold people to the letter of honesty and morality, because people like Lauren Underwood or Kamala Harris, there's so many politicians in the state of California. We have an enormous bench, Robert Garcia and Alex Padilla and whatnot, really are moral, honest people who want to see the country be better. So understand that we're not alone. There's lots of them, and that putting your nose to the grindstone, not today, but in a couple of days' time, will make you feel a lot better. And as Pete said, you might want to go outside once in a while and eat. I didn't want to eat today. And
I ate. I'm not like you. I ate a full pizza, but I would
also really this morning.
I had a pizza, and then also I think find your favorite animal, Greg, which is what, like, spend time with an animal, don't you think? Even if you don't like animals.
I have an ephemeral emotional support jack that I keep here on the Proop Ranch. It's just a small barking deer from Vietnam. It's just the cutest thing. His name is Emil, and he keeps me sane. Really. I watch him.
Bring him over. I don't believe. Bring him over. I want to see him.
We play a lot of croquet, and he cheats. I love that about him. I love that he's a scamp. There was all these people during the pandemic that learned to speak Portuguese and play the oboe and whatnot. And I drank for 18 months a bottle of vodka every day. So I've given up drink. I've given up almost everything. I have no crutches now. And that's what's making me feel extra bereft. You know what I mean? Because once upon a time, I would have just gotten absolutely slaughtered and tried to deal with it that way. And I'm not doing that now. And so dealing with your own emotions is almost as ugly as dealing with my relatives.
I think you should have a pizza.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a pizza. Also, just quick shout out, Arizona, Colorado, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, and New York all enshrined abortion rights into their constitutions. So, hey, what?
And 2 black women in the Senate.
And 2 black women in the Senate. I believe 1 trans person in Congress.
Right?
So there's things that happened that weren't all terrible. And that is the end of the show. And I would love for the people of Fake the Nation to be able to follow you and all the wonderful work that you do. Pete, Dominick, where do they do that?
My daily podcast, Monday through Friday. It's Stand Up with Pete Dominick. I cover the news. I produce the whole thing myself from my little home here in upstate New York. And I have a great guest every day. Again, I'd love both of you to join me in the coming weeks whenever you want. And that's it.
Love the podcast. Been on the podcast. Highly recommend that podcast. Greg Proops, where do they find you?
You can go to gregproops.com. Everything will be there. The album will be out on the 15th. It's called Purple Shasta Raccoon. I have a couple of other albums called In the City and a French Drug Deal, and one that I made during the middle of Trump called Resistance. The last 2 albums I made were completely improvised off the top of my head. I'm going to do that again. Yes, I'm confident enough to do it. And then, of course, I have a podcast, a film club, and I'm in Nightmare Before Christmas, the live show. We're going to London in December, and I'm really looking forward to that. And Who's Live? I'm on the road with the guys. This week, it's Dave Foley sitting in with us from Kids in the Hall. So that's really exciting. In December, Drew Carey will sit in with us. So we're booked all the way through next year. So we'll be bringing joy to states both red and blue.
Guys, what a fucking treat to see these guys perform live. Definitely go and check that out, and check out many of Greg's albums. A prolific man with so much work for you to enjoy. And you know where to find me and all the things that I do. Just a reminder that you can support the show at patreon.com/Negin Farsad. Thanks so much to our wonderful producer, Andrew McGuire. Thanks to everyone at HeadGum for making the show a possibility. You can email us at fakethenationpodcast@gmail.com if you have any ideas. And otherwise, we'll be back in your earballs next week.
That was a HeadGum podcast.